This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire School Board meeting. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM.
I call to order the board meeting, the Eau Claire Area School District, and we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary Iverson, has the meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
Could you do roll call, please?
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm here.
Commissioner Cummins.
Here.
Commissioner Humbach-Boyle.
Here.
Commissioner Duax.
Here.
Commissioner Vu.
Here.
Commissioner Zhang.
Here.
And Commissioner Spindler is not here yet.
And this is the time for the public forum, and nobody has signed up, so we won't have any speakers unless somebody pleads for their opportunity now. All right, then we go on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. A very short superintendent's report tonight. I want to point out some of the dates that are coming up for the board. Tomorrow there is a Charter Choice Committee meeting from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Administration Building. From December 22nd until January 2nd, all schools will be closed for winter break. They will reopen on January 5th, 10:30 on that day in the Administration Building. There will be a Policy and Governance Committee meeting, and then that evening at 7 p.m. in the Administration Building there will be a school board meeting. I do want to remind the board that on January 20th at 11 a.m., from 11 a.m. until noon, in the Administration Building, the Systems Analysis Review will be going on, and that will be your time to be interviewed by the visiting team. And then on January 21st through 23rd is the WASB Convention in Milwaukee. And if you are interested in attending that and have not yet notified Ms. Iverson, please do so. Thank you.
Patty, do you have a default password? Apparently I don't know mine to get into Board Docs, or not? Yes. Can you write it down for me? Thank you. I don't have any communications. Thank you. I printed it out, but apparently you get one thing per page when you do the detail report, so that's a waste of paper. There are no communications that I am aware of to the board president, so then we move on to our committee reports. Do we have a report from the Policy and Governance Committee?
We met today and we worked on the fund policy, and we also worked on open enrollment policy today, right?
The Budget Committee has not met. Do we have a legislative update?
Yes, we do. I pulled the legislative report off of WASB, wasb.org. I'm not certainly going to go through the whole thing, but people can go and get this information at wasb.org. I just highlighted a couple things this evening. One is there is some softening to the opposition to the Common Core. According to published reports, Republican lawmakers are backing away from rhetoric calling for an end to the Common Core standards, saying any legislation next year would allow school districts to keep the standards. We're not necessarily going to repeal Common Core because they are standards adopted by the DPI, said Assembly Speaker Robin Voss, referring to the State Department of Public Instruction. If school districts like the standards, they can keep them, but I think you want to make sure that nobody feels compelled. Okay, so that's here. And the other one, I won't go into it, but there's new details on the accountability bill between districts and voucher schools. There's also some information on Governor Walker's comments on education issues. But I thought it would be interesting for the board and for people in the audience to know that the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel just ran a story about the voucher program's march towards 30,000 students in the state. And I just thought it'd be interesting for you to know where the enrollments and what they fit. There's a total of 159 voucher schools in the state as of this fall, 113 in Milwaukee serving 26,930 students, 15 in Racine serving 1,740 students, and 31 statewide with serving the approximate 1,013 students. Almost all of them are religious. The majority are Catholic, Lutheran, and Christian schools. This is the part I thought was interesting. The programs cost taxpayers about $211 million, according to state estimates for 2014-15. The programs in Racine and statewide are fully funded by state tax dollars, and in Milwaukee, the state only pays for about 2/3, and the rest comes from their local taxpayers. Also, and I'm not going to go into it, they went into the recent continuing resolution, the budget in Washington for the country, and you can go to WASB and see the 4 points they highlighted related to K-12 education. One has to do with school aid programs for Title I, and IDEA is sustained. Not much increase there, just pretty much sustained at what it was at. Also, $14 million increase in funding for English language acquisition grants, so I'm sure that's competitive. And then the language regarding school improvement grants provides more options for school districts for locally designed school turnaround programs, which I thought was interesting. And then the last one was some flexibility with districts on the standards set for nutrition. They're going to lack some of those up. And that's the end of my legislative report.
And then, since you're meeting tomorrow, the Charter Committee doesn't have a report tonight. Then, I'm sorry, Hannah, I skipped the student representative report, so if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Didn't mind very much. But, so Jonah and I met with Dr. Duax today for lunch, and he asked me to share an email that he received from, I think it was a student, asking us to reconsider the headwear policy, just trying to update it so that maybe more options are available for students to express their individualities and things like that among the dress code. Not anything specific, they just asked us to reconsider it maybe. And then I was also approached by a custodian at North who just wanted to see if I could raise some consideration for maybe custodial raises, since the majority of the other staff got raises this year. Being on the dance team, they do a lot for us, and they're really, really helpful to our team in particular. And there's one staff member who has actually made his way to competitions to support us, and they just go out of their way to make sure that we know that they're doing their job for us and that they appreciate us. And I don't know, I just said that I would mention something to let them know that they're appreciated too. So that's my report.
And then the Demographic Trends and Facility Planning Committee met last week for the second time this year. At the last meeting, Charlie Kramer reviewed the 5-year plan, which we've all seen, and we had an overview of the entire comprehensive plan, and then the projects for next year. We got a reminder summary on the backlog in facility needs that we have, and that we're unable to meet with the annual budget. And we took care of some of those needs with the last referendum with the 3 elementary schools and DeLong, but there's continuing needs there, and we've know that South is going to need the remodel as well, and so we were able to ask questions about that. And before the committee makes any recommendations on it to the board, we'll be discussing further whether there's going to need to be any elementary facility expansions. looking at the demographic trends. And so we are waiting for the APL to do their update so that we can look at that piece in the near future, hopefully. We're hoping to get it by the January meeting, but that may be pushing it a bit. And then in conjunction with that, Mr. Vandewater reviewed the different types of referendums, the history of the referendums in this district in the past 10 to 15 years, kind of the history of referendums in the state since the funding formulas were implemented in 1993, and to create the background knowledge for making recommendations again about the backlog and facility needs and any future needs of the elementary schools in particular. In January, we're meeting again, and we'll be talking about, I guess, getting an update on the future uses of our one unused building, Little Red. It continues to be unused. We haven't had any interest in buying it, so we'll get an update on what might be available for that building, and then a discussion about the enrollment disparity between the two high schools for next month. And I think that would be it for committee reports. So we'll move on to the consent resolution agenda. There's a number of them, so if anything needs to be pulled, please indicate. Otherwise, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 1, 2014 meeting, the minutes of the closed session on December 1, 2014, the minutes of the closed session on December 8, 2014, bills payable. Board of Education approved payment of all bills in the amount of $5,060,471.14 and net payroll in the amount of $3,073,248.17 for the period of November 1st, 2014 through November 30th, 2014. That we approve gifts in the amount of $12,233.69.
Hold that, please.
Period of November 1st through November 30th. That we approve the budget adjustments as presented in our report, that we approve the financial report for November, and the human resources employment report. So other than item 5.6, the gift report.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Because it's financial, I think we have to have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Duax,
Yes.
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Zhang,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cummins,
Yes.
Commissioner Humbug-Boyle.
Yes.
And then can I have a motion to accept the gifts in the amount of $12,233.69 for the period of November 1st through November 30th of 2014?
I so move. Second.
Okay, questions or comments?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to comment that of the $12,233.69, more than $4,000 of that was kind of fun. That many community connections that we are so thankful for, connections that are both individuals, families, and businesses. So the Board of Education thanks them. Thank you.
All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Duax,
Yes.
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Zhang,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cummins,
Yes.
Commissioner Humbug-Boyle.
Yes.
All right, with that, I believe we can adjourn to the committee meeting. And first up would be the annual report from the Montessori Charter School.
Well, good evening. My name is Todd Johnson, and I'm the principal at Chippewa Valley Montessori. And tonight, I have a few people that are going to help me present our annual report. I have Jeremy Harrison, who's an E1 teacher and also a parent in our building. I have Julie Campbell, who is a teacher at the Children's House level and she also sits on the governance board. I have Liz Harder, who's our governance board president. And then I have Erika Zur, who is a parent at our school. So, thanks. There are 6 areas of focus in our presentation tonight. Who we are, some of our data, our math journey, our approach to the whole child, the governance board goals, and our garden project. It's hard to separate what we do out into individual topics since they all intertwine and affect each other. There are 2 components that influence the structure of our school. The first is that we were created as a charter school, and the second is that we use the Montessori approach. As a charter school, we are allowed to do things that other schools can't do, such as we can choose our own curriculum, but with that said, we sometimes find ourselves being held to a higher degree of accountability. We provide an alternative to traditional education. We can meet some of the unique needs of families by offering more individualized attention, which we're able to do due to our size. We give parents and community members a chance to provide oversight of the school by serving on the governance board. Some of our unique Montessori components has us looking at the whole child as we make decisions on their learning. Julie will talk more about this in a little bit. One of the very unique things in our school is our multi-age classrooms. This allows us options to work with students in small groups based on their abilities rather than age. We find that we can really be rigorous with the students when we can meet them at their ability level. Students have some choice and freedom in their work. For example, they can choose when to do their follow-up learning and in which order, such as math first or second during their follow-up work. But they don't have a choice in growing their skills and knowledge. You'll also find our rooms set up to handle this approach with areas for children to work in small groups, whole group, or as individuals. Evidence that we look at to see if we're being successful include parent surveys and achievement data. K-12 Insight has been a very useful tool to determine if we're meeting our expectations. This is one example. Up on the screen, this is an overall grade that parents would give our school. Green is a grade of A. As you can see, our parents think the school is a high quality place to send their children. One of the areas that we're sensitive to is our racial and ethnic balance. The state statute 118.4 states that when a school petitions to be a charter school, you need to explain the means by which you will achieve your racial and ethnic balance among its pupils that is reflective of the school district. While our data indicates we're increasing in diversity, so is the district. We have created a new detailed plan, which I'll be sending to Dr. Hardebeck at the end of the week. Other areas that we can look at is our state report card. Overall, we scored above the state average in all except one of the 4 components on the state report card. This is the first year that we were measured in the category of closing the gap. We started to address this measurement as soon as we received our report card. I would like to briefly turn our attention to our growth scores, in particular, our math growth score. A growth score tells us how much influence our teachers had on our students' learning this past year. In other words, it tells us how much the children grew in their math skills compared with similar children in other schools across the state. When you compare our school's math growth scores to other elementary schools, we are in the top 3% of all elementary schools across the state. The staff has come a long way since 2011 and 2012 when we were below the state average with our math growth scores. We changed our level of growth by starting with our building goal. Next, Jeremy, who is an E1 teacher, will talk about our math journey.
Hello. Sorry. I'm Jeremy Harrison. I'm an E1 teacher at the Montessori school. That's what would in a traditional school be first through third grade. But I have a multi-age first through third grade classroom. Our goal as a building is to get 80% of our students on benchmark, on or above benchmark as far as the Ames comp, our MComp score is. That's looking at math, computation, whether it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, some of the basic math that we expect children to do. And where we've started this year, when we look at these slides, we really needed to start with some honest conversations with each other about what works. What is it that we're doing that is working, that aligns with the Common Core? What is it that maybe we're over teaching that doesn't really align with Common Core at this point? Because the Montessori philosophy is incredibly different than what the traditional schools might be doing. We were doing some things that we're finding maybe that's not the best use of our time, and we could rededicate that time into things where we had some maybe gaps, you would call it, or lapses as far as student learning goes. So in order to do that, we looked a lot at our data from our previous assessments that we've done. We had some really honest conversations with each other, discussing each other's observations on what we're learning, how we're teaching, how we could teach each other what we're doing well in order to coach each other up to become better math teachers also. Our PLC team had discussions looking at the whole child, which Julie's going to speak with in a moment, but the idea that we still are a Montessori school and that yes, we do need to make sure that they hit these benchmarks, but at the same time we need to stay true to the identity of the school itself. Along with that, we spent I'd say the bulk of last year as a staff really working on unpacking what is Common Core asking us to do and how do we make sure our Montessori students are going to be able to achieve those, all of those standards within that. At present, we're using our Montessori materials consistently in our classrooms to build a deeper understanding of concepts. We've spent quite a bit of time aligning those materials, tweaking those, adding new lessons as needed in order to make sure that we're hitting the same benchmarks that the Common Core state standards are requiring of us. We continually practice math fluency along with that to make sure that students are getting extra practice with those basics in addition to the Montessori philosophy. We do a progress monitoring that is a normed assessment with the AIMSweb, both comp and cap, which is concepts and applications and computation. So they are seeing word problems, they are seeing traditional just addition, subtraction, things like that. Our PLC leadership team has had conversations that center around what's working, how we could meet their needs of individual students, where we need to make improvements. We try to, again, put an emphasis on the whole child in these conversations, not just math, but trying to look at what is it that also comes up as far as this student's needs, as far as it could be lack of nutrition, it could be a specific home environment that might be challenging along with their other academic areas. And then we continually do ongoing reviews of our students to meet their needs, to see how we can best move them forward or remediate the areas that they're struggling with at this time. Ms. Julie is up next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julie Campbell, and I am a Children's House Guide in a classroom of 4- and 5-year-olds. And I'm also on the Chippewa Valley Montessori Charter Schools Governance Board. This evening, I just wanted to briefly present a few of the Montessori philosophies and practices that work together like the pieces of a puzzle to nurture the whole child. And as we've listened to other presenters so far this evening, they've commented on quite a few different aspects that contribute to the whole child, and I'd like to touch on a few of those tonight. When I consider a jigsaw puzzle, I have my own personal strategy. I like to first collect all of the border pieces and construct that first so that I have a boundary within that I can keep working within. And here are some of the boundary concepts of the Montessori philosophy. Let's take a closer look at the framework that these create for us. First, we have the absorbent mind. The absorbent mind is the driving force behind Dr. Montessori's theories of how children learn. Much like a camera, the young child's absorbent mind effortlessly and unconsciously absorbs every stimulus and impression that surrounds the child. Sensitive periods. Sensitive periods are developmental phases characterized by the child's extreme interest, intense concentration, and focused effort on one specific skill without tiring. The main sensitive periods include language development, sensory perception, order, and movement, and it's very critical that we capitalize on these sensitive periods as they occur. The hands prepare the mind. As children manipulate Montessori specifically designed hands-on materials, their hands and brain operate together through coordinated work and concentration to create the child's intelligence. Achieving abstraction. Each concrete material isolates a specific abstract concept in order to make it more clear. Initially, lessons and activities are introduced simply and concretely. Later, they're presented at increasing degrees of abstraction and complexity as children progress. Children will eventually work abstractly with paper and pencil, but not until they've internalized the concept concretely. Freedom and discipline. Montessori education promotes freedom in 3 areas: the freedom of choice, the freedom to repeat, and the freedom of movement. And of course, these freedoms must also be balanced with appropriate and consistent limitations. Deep concentration. In a Montessori classroom, there is deep respect for children who are concentrating and focused on their work. Concentration produces inner discipline, and it's when children are deeply concentrating without any distraction that their brains are constructing themselves. The great work period. A 3-hour work cycle is a very important component of a successful Montessori program. Children are able to engage in a variety of challenging activities and concentrate for long periods of time if they have the reassuring predictability of an uninterrupted work cycle. Any interruption to the child's work period disrupts the fragile focus, concentration, critical thinking, problem solving, and exploration that is being developed. Multi-age. Multi-age learning communities provide unlimited opportunities for social development as children observe, learn, and interact with their peers. Universal respect. Respect is a major cornerstone of the Montessori method. The children learn integrity and an all-encompassing respect, which includes self-respect, respect for others, and respect for the world and everything in it. Respect is embedded in grace and courtesy lessons that we use in the Montessori classroom. The role of the adult. The role of the adult in a Montessori classroom is really not to teach. Instead, it is to guide children toward their true potential by supporting every child's specific needs and challenging their individual abilities. Therefore, at Chippewa Valley Montessori Charter School, nurturing the whole child looks differently for each and every student. Independence. Achieving independence is a major conquest in a child's development. When children are able to do things for themselves, they gain confidence and self-esteem. Self-construction. Ultimately, the goal of Montessori education is for children to autonomously develop the skills necessary for productive and fulfilling lives. So, much like the outer border of a jigsaw puzzle, the Montessori method provides intricate guidelines that eventually lead children to self-construction. I'd like to close tonight with a quote from Albert Einstein. "I never teach my pupils, I only provide the conditions in which they learn." Thank you. Up next is Liz Harder, Governance Board President.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Harder, and I'm the parent rep and the current president of the Governance Board at Chippewa Valley Montessori School, which from now on I'm going to say CVMCS because I say it a lot. I'm going to give a brief overview of the strategic plan, the school's strategic plan this year. At CVMCS, we review our strategic plan yearly, and we involve both the governance board and staff members in that process. This year, we identified 3 goals that we believe are most important to our school, and they are enrollment diversity, Montessori identity, and governance board effectiveness. Our first goal is to increase the diversity of the Chippewa Valley Montessori School student body. Better reflecting the diversity of the school district has been an ongoing initiative at CVMCS. Last year, some of the steps our diversity committee took included initiating a meeting with the bus company to consider the possibility of 4K busing, and also a neighbourhood knock and talk, which we conducted with a Hmong language interpreter. This year, the committee has updated our school's diversity policy. This new overarching policy covers both how diversity is approached in the curriculum and also what steps the school will take to decrease the barriers to entry for enrolment at CVMCS, especially into our 4K programme. We'll continue to work towards making sure CVMCS is as accessible as possible to all families in our community who are interested in enrolling, and that we're getting the word out to as wide an audience as possible about who we are and what we offer. Our second goal is to ensure that CVMCS is fulfilling its mission as a public charter school by providing a high-quality Montessori education to each student. The role of any charter school is to provide a distinctly different approach to education in the community. Chippewa Valley Montessori School was created to provide a Montessori option in Eau Claire. Montessori charter schools need to meet the demands of the public school system while also staying true to the Montessori philosophy. Like many schools around the country, at CVMCS we have been challenged over the past couple of years to increase focus on state testing and to successfully implement the Common Core. The staff survey that we conducted last year, as well as our school-wide strategic planning session, alerted us to the fact that staff had some concerns about reconciling our demands as a public school with the Montessori approach. In light of this feedback, we decided the time is right to spend some extra effort clarifying our school's Montessori identity. We first formed a Montessori Identity Committee, which in turn has set up 3 school-wide staff meetings so far this year, 2 of which were led by a third-party professional facilitator. The meetings were designed to allow the entire staff to contribute to defining the core values of our school. The Identity Committee has used feedback from those meetings to put together a draft document describing our core Montessori values and essential pedagogies for the school. We are in the process of refining our exact plan for the different ways that this newly drafted document will be used, but however it's ultimately used, we intend it to serve as an important ongoing point of reference for the school, and are confident there's great value in having a document which reflects our core values and helps draw some key points of distinction between CVMCS and other public schools in the district. Our third and final goal is to increase the effectiveness of the governance board. The CVMCS Governance Board is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the terms of our contract with the district are being met. We take this particular responsibility very seriously, and so the Governance Board has spent the last year reassessing our role within the school to ensure that we're focusing on the right kind of work and that we're operating as effectively as possible. Our first step was to form a communication committee responsible for ensuring we maintain strong lines of contact with our parents, staff, and other stakeholders. Over the last year, this committee has produced and distributed a monthly newsletter and has hosted 2 parent forum nights, with a 3rd scheduled for next year. Our Board Education Committee has also played an important role in the effectiveness of initiative by including a board education session at each of our board meetings. This year, we'll continue to focus on clarifying the powers and responsibilities of the Governance Board, on sharpening our strategic focus on the issues that matter most to the success of our school, and on organising our board membership to be the most effective we can be. So these are our 3 current strategic initiatives. Being as we're only midway through the school year, we still have a lot of work to do, and we look forward to later this school year being able to report more to both our families and the school boards with our progress. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica Zur. I am a mother to Ariel Brummett, who is in 1st grade at Chippewa Valley Montessori Charter School. Dr. Maria Montessori believed that nature was the most important educational space for children. She said, quote, "It is necessary for the soul of the child to be in contact with creation, to understand and appreciate the order, harmony, and beauty in nature. In the fall of 2013, a group of Montessori parents and myself began discussing the need for such a place at CVMCS. Our school is located in the old Lincoln Elementary School building, and improvements to the school's outdoor environment have long been stalled due to funding barriers. Although it was a small step, we believe that establishing an interactive school garden would not only provide children with a fantastic learning opportunity, but also fulfill a piece of Maria Montessori's vision. With that, let me walk you through the journey of establishing what we have lovingly called the Garden Classroom at Chippewa Valley Montessori Charter School. In the early months of 2014, I approached the school administration on behalf of an interested group of parents. Todd graciously guided us through establishing a garden committee as a subcommittee of the parent group. Once established, we immediately set the goal of building raised garden beds, planning for organic methods, and developing curriculum in keeping with the guiding principles of Maria Montessori. To fund this project, we reached out to the greater community and received monetary donations from Mayo Clinic Health System, Organic Valley Cooperative, and Just Local Food Cooperative, totaling $1,300. That amount was matched by the generous contributions of families and friends of our school. With further assistance of in-kind donations of materials, time, and labor, we were able to make the garden a reality. During the first part of April, students participated in a building day where they helped construct their raised garden beds. It was amazing to watch children take ownership of the project. They were incredibly enthusiastic, empowered, and responsible when the volunteers handed them the power tools. Once the garden was built, class time was scheduled for each class within the school. Classes took turns spending time working with volunteers in the garden, preparing, planning, and planting. The curriculum, which was developed by the garden committee with guidance from the teachers at CVMCS, was based both on the ideas of Maria Montessori, but also on the developmental abilities of each age group within the school. Children's House students were in the garden first. They were responsible for filling the garden beds with dirt and preparing the beds for planting. We kept them engaged with tactile activities and lots of movement. Next were the E2 students. They were handed seed packets, asked to read and interpret the information, and then draw to scale models of each bed, including proper plant spacing and written instructions for care. Once their diagrams were complete, it was the job of the E1 students to read and interpret the diagrams, scale them up, measure, and plant the beds. So you can see not only were students up and engaging actively with nature, but we're also getting practical exercises in mathematics, reading, and science. As the students age, they will experience every piece of planning and planting a garden. Parent volunteers cared for the garden during the summer months, with each family tending the garden for 1 week. In the fall, the students returned to a lush garden overflowing with produce. Students and volunteers worked together to harvest all they could from the garden. Once harvested, the garden committee again reached out to our greater community to source enough local produce to supplement the garden harvest. In October, students participated in a harvest day party where they got to eat salsa salad and watermelon from their garden. It was incredible to watch students try new things. They had so much pride in what they had accomplished. One student said it was the best food he had ever been served at school. As we look to the future, our goal with the garden classroom is first to improve its sustainability and longevity by building a small greenhouse, an enclosed composting structure, and further developing curriculum and activities for students within the school. Eventually, it is our goal to use the success of the garden classroom to spur further improvements to the outdoor environment at our school. Please come and work with the students in the spring if you would like. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you, thank you.
So that ends our report. I just want to say thank you for your support, and I want to thank Commissioner Hambach-Boyle for sitting on our governance board as well. I think that's a great connection that we have that allows us, greater access to the school board and to the governance board. So thank you.
Great, I want to thank you for all the work. I can see a lot being done. Do commissioners have questions, comments? Commissioner Johnson.
I have a comment. One of the key reasons for having charter schools is to serve as a model for other schools, and so I hope that there is some sort of formal invitation or connection for the other schools to learn, particularly this garden project is really interesting, and you know, we hear chatter here and there about other schools getting gardens, and so you know, the process, the curriculum, and all of that, I would hope that there's some sort of a formal connection to other schools to encourage them to engage in such a project.
Commissioner John.
I'm very interested in your goal number 1. I would like to see it develop, and when it's done, I would like to see those numbers improve.
Commissioner Cummins.
Many of you know I have a senior in high school who was in the very first kindergarten class at Montessori. And I could not be more pleased with your presentation. I think all your goals are exactly right on. I hope that you stay true to Montessori. I think you have the governance board you've been waiting for a long time. And I think that it is truly every hurdle, every bar that we've raised, you've met, and I could not be more pleased. I hope that you develop it into more, increase it into a middle school model as well. We can set some more bars for you to reach. The increase in the diversity is huge, and you've taken it on, and you've been very true to the Montessori philosophy. So just kudos, and your hard work is very evident, and I have been on this side of the relationship between the governance board and the school board for a long time, and feel completely energized and like I can go out to the community and say, why do we have a charter school? This is the one we have, this is what they're doing, and we need more.
So does that mean Little Red is on the table?
Commissioner Duax.
Just one voice. Go ahead.
Thank you. It sounds really stimulating and wonderful there, and I love gardens. My dad was a farmer, and I think it's really important for kids to know where the food comes from. I have a question about art and music in your school.
Sure.
How is that delivered or covered?
Art and music and Fayed, it's very similar to what you would see in a traditional school. We're working on ways to what that could look like in the Montessori school, but the only thing I'll add to that is when we talk to the staff, it's probably because we have exceptional art, music, and Fayed teachers, but they feel that they deliver it in a way that we feel is Montessori by how they talk to the kids and how they set up the environments and the multi-age classrooms, but we're always looking to do things better.
I just want to compliment you on the strategic planning work. I know how much work that is. On the math piece, thank you for working on that. I was just going to say I found it interesting that it's a good example of the PLC model that we're using throughout the district and how it seems to have worked well for you. So I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. It has worked well. So.
Hopefully it bodes well for our other schools also. So, any other questions or comments for the group there? Okay, great. Thank you for the great report. Thank you for all the work. It's very much appreciated. Okay, we have the policy 662.3 back to us for the fund balance. I don't know if we have any comments from any of the policy and governments members about it. I can see the changes to it. Do we want to just, it looks like the changes are to number 1 on it, the list of 4, and then at the end, it looks like to make it consistent with number 1. Is that accurate? Yes? Okay. Do any board members have any questions or comments about it? Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I love the new sentence.
All right. Okay. Everyone reasonably pleased with it? Then we could have a first reading of it tonight, if someone was willing to volunteer. It's a little bit long. Oh, you're being volunteered, Commissioner Duax. Are you okay with that?
If I have to cough and somebody else can.
Okay, someone else can take and read, okay.
Fund balance, policy 662.3. The board recognizes that maintaining an adequate fund balance in the district's general fund is essential to the financial stability of the district and sound fiscal management. The board also recognizes its responsibility to ensure that the district's fund balance resources are used properly and reported in accordance with applicable legal requirements and generally accepted accounting principles for governmental entities. The board believes that an adequate fund balance is necessary for the successful fiscal operation of the district. To that end, the board recognizes the need to carry an operating reserve in the general fund to 1. Minimize any short-term borrowing during the annual operating cycle, 2. Serve as a safeguard against unanticipated expenditures and/or unrealized revenues, and 3. Demonstrate sound fiscal management, resulting in a high credit rating and reducing district financing costs. Fund balance, the difference between the district's assets and its liabilities, shall be reviewed annually to determine allocation between non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned/unrestricted fund balance account classifications. This shall be done as part of the district's budget planning process. Non-spendable fund balance. This classification includes amounts that cannot be spent because they are either A, not in spendable form, or B, legally or contractually required to be maintained intact. This would include items not expected to be converted to cash, such as inventories and prepaid amounts. Restricted fund balance. This classification should be reported when constraints placed on the use of resources are either A, externally imposed by creditors, grantors, contributors, or laws or regulations of other governments, or B, imposed by law through constitutional provisions or enabling legislation. For example, the fund balance of the debt service fund, which is used to repay debt authorized by referendum, is restricted by bonding covenants to be used only for the repayment of long-term debt. Committed fund balance. This classification consists of amounts that are committed for specific purposes by formal action of the school board. Such constraints can only be removed or changed by the same form of formal action. For example, major maintenance projects where formal action of the board is required to establish and release a commitment. Assigned fund balance. This classification includes amounts that are intended to be used for a specific purpose, but are neither restricted nor formally committed. For example, major maintenance projects where the action to establish and release a commitment is delegated by the board to a position such as the Executive Director of Business Services. Unassigned and restricted fund balance. This classification includes any remaining amounts that are not classified as non-spendable, restricted, committed, or assigned working capital is an example of this classification. The school board recognizes the need to maintain an adequate unassigned/unrestricted fund balance in the general fund for the following purposes: as a safeguard in the event of unexpected expenses and unrealized revenues, to reduce the need for short-term cash flow borrowing, to demonstrate financial stability and sound fiscal management. Fund balance amounts will be reported in conformance with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and legal requirements. Unrestricted fund balances shall be restated at the end of each fiscal year, June 30, for general purpose financial statements. The board may, from time to time, commit fund balance resources for a specific purpose. To the extent board action regarding any fund balance amounts under this policy constitutes a budget amendment under state law, i.e., a change in the amounts of the appropriations or the purposes for such appropriations as stated in an adopted school district budget. A 2/3 vote of the entire membership of the board shall be required, and a legal notice of the action taken shall be issued as required by law. The district shall strive to maintain an unassigned, unrestricted year-end fund balance in the general fund to avoid the need to short-term borrow for cash flow purposes. The Executive Director of Business Services will provide an annual review of the district's fund balance and make recommendations to the board regarding the fund balance.
Thank you, Commissioner Duex.
Great.
Excellent. You got the right voice for it. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we shall assume there's agreement, unanimous consent to move it along next time for resolution. Okay, thank you. So we have the new policy here, policy 411, the equal employment opportunity. And I don't, unfortunately, have it in front of me because I can't log in. But if we could put that up on the screen, that would be great. Here we go. Okay. Would someone on the policy and governance or staff person either give just a quick summary of this, why it's before us now? Anyone? Or superintendent, either way. Go ahead.
Well, for this policy, there was a word which needed to be in there, and so the entire, the word is color, and the entire sentence reads, no person shall be denied admission to any public school or be denied participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be discriminated against in any curricular, extracurricular, pupil services, recreational, and other program or activity because of the student's sex, race, religion, color, which is being added, national origin, ancestry, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, sexual orientation, or physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability.
Okay, great. And that's the only change to it? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I believe that's all we need to do for a reading. Is that everyone okay with that? Was unanimous consent? We'll just move it along for a resolution next time? Okay, great. Great. That's nice and quick. Thank you for putting that in. All right. So next on our agenda is a discussion on forming compensation committees. So as you remember last time, we had a work session on restructuring our compensation, and we agreed to move that to a committee report, to a committee session here to discuss that and see if we can eventually get a resolution on forming committees. And the way I was thinking we could structure this conversation, there's really 4 areas that we need to make decisions on, and the 4 is really what types of compensation or rewards do we want to include in a charge of a committee that we would form. Second would be like what kind of boundaries or parameters would be put around that charge that we'd say, well, yep, this is what we want you to look at, this not. A third is how many committees would we actually want, okay? And a fourth would be what would be those committees' composition. And our consultant from WASB, Bob Butler, he has sent us suggestions for those, and we can discuss those. So for the first one, types of compensation or rewards to include, and I'll read what Bob Butler had sent to us so everyone's aware of it. He said, the first question is whether the committee is restricted to employees' individual salaries, or if the committee will review total compensation, e.g. additional duty pay, post-employment benefits, health insurance. And he said most districts have limited scope to salaries, though not all, but have provided information to employees on other components of compensation. So I think that's the first thing we should talk about. And if, I think I'll just leave it open now and see if what thoughts and comments the board members have on that part first. Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Well, considering that we have had reports about all of those and more listed over the past few years, and each time we've gotten to the point of making a possible decision, we've said, well, let's wait for the compensation study. I guess I was under the impression that we would include like literally everything. Maybe insurance would stay with the insurance committee, but you know, if there are recommendations on those other things, post-employment benefits, you know, maybe in conjunction with what the compensation package, you know, the recommendations that would be included. I guess post-employment benefits and insurance are a little different, but for sure, longevity should be rolled into the bigger compensation model. I mean,
We've also received an increments report.
yeah, absolutely. So extra duty pay, you know, whether there, you know, we should have none or more or, you know, the same or, you know, anything in between. The increments for coaching salaries and other extra duties, all of it. I guess I would want to see it all included. And partly that comes from, you know, this desire to create some uniformity and also predictability. You know, when we only have this much money and, you know, people say, well, you know, give it to us this way, but then we also want this. Well, that's not realistic. And so if we're not using longevity pay, for example, or we're not, you know, using some of those things that are in existence, and in fact, they're not in existence. And so I think it all goes in.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Zhang.
I too would like all of it, the whole compensation package, but I don't know if that's going to be doable just because it took so long to get all these reports. Maybe something's changed. Are we trying to have this accomplished within the next year? I just don't think it's going to be doable, because if we're going to add all those components other than base pay. But I could be wrong, and I wish I'm wrong, because I want the whole compensation package reviewed and something given to us, but I don't know if it's going to be doable. That's my...
Just to answer you, Bob Butler has said that committees that have been formed have finished in about 5 months giving their recommendation, but that may not have included something like OPEB. It has included, you know, extra duty pay recommendations, but not necessarily, you know, like post-retirement, so it kind of depends. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you.
I think personally, as far as the all the pieces, I thought Bob kind of alluded to the fact, and I would think this too, that the prioritizing of what all the pieces are, I think needs to come from committee, because I think that will help drive what those pieces should be. And OPEB's a big piece of that, and I'm not sure where that should fit right now, or whether we should work on that down the road.
Okay, thank you. I like the statement about prioritizing, and you know, maybe that is something the committee, I mean, we could put that in a charge, that one of the first things they could do. So. Commissioner Vu.
I'd like to see that whatever the item we choose, they need to be aligned with the board's goal. And as a matter of fact, use the budget, the goal to drive the achievement for what it is we're trying to do. And compensation is just one way to get there.
Okay. I'd just like to follow up on that, because I did have on mine, I would like to consider more intrinsic rewards that are not necessarily non-monetary as part of it. There may be some things that they could think of that would improve retention of employees that may not be directly compensation. So that was one of my thoughts on that. Commissioner Johnson.
To respond a little bit to Commissioner Zhang, it does seem a little bit overwhelming, you know, and a very large charge to include total compensation, but because there have been these other kind of reviews, I think that they're starting, you know, with a lot of information. And I am also reminded of the handbook committee, when we were forced to go through that process to create a handbook. You know, if you look at it, it's a huge document. There were several sections. There were, you know, considerations from all the different employee groups and all the different individual contracts that were, you know, being replaced, and because it had to be done, it got done. And, you know, I don't want to force the people on the committee to meet every single week, but that's what the handbook committee did, like literally met weekly for about 4 or 5 months. And so I think, you know, if it takes more than 5 months, you know, that's understandable. But, you know, I think when you've got a big project, if you know, understand the scope of it and dig in, it's, you know, that the people are capable of doing that.
Thank you for sharing that. Obviously, I was not here for that, so, and who knows, maybe we will tackle it and get it done, and everything is merry and bright.
Commissioner Duex.
One thing that wasn't mentioned on the list was further education, accomplishing another degree or something.
Oh, I see. So monetary support for professional development in the sense of getting degrees or something. You mean?
Well, that has been rewarded in the past, so I think it should be on the list.
Okay. Others. So one thing we'll have to do is come back to the board with a description of what to include in the charge. And there's a lot of things, I mean, there's a couple of options. We can kind of just list things, or we could say things that we definitely don't want in it, or we could just say, well, we'll ask the committee to prioritize it. One of my feelings is, one of those that I don't really feel like necessarily should be in is health benefits. That's pretty much set for a little while, I think. But I'm open to the others. How would you like to do that in a charge if, you know, if like an agenda setting, we start developing a charge to put together a proposal for next time for the board to consider? Would you want the charge to say, let the committee consider all these and prioritize, as Chris said, or what would you think? Commissioner Cummins.
At this point, I would want to maximize flexibility and freedom for the committee. I just think we're at the beginning of the process, and there's so much we don't know about how our faculty really feels about the different components of this. So I would just want to maximize their ability to communicate back to us before we narrow our focus too much. But I also agree with Commissioner Johnson in that we've put so many things on hold, and for me, everything short of healthcare, though, as it relates to OPEB, I do think it needs to be in there. I think everything needs to be looked at, and it's been 3 years of saying, we'll just wait, we'll just wait, we'll just wait.
Okay. Commissioner Vu.
Is there a way to make those lists available for some of us who are new?
As in the data that's been provided before?
The list that Commissioner Johnson's alluding to.
I think we could pull that up. What's been provided to the board before? Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll put a note for that. Commissioner Duex.
I was just going to agree with Commissioner Cummins that we should give them flexibility, and I'm sure that some of the employees will think of things that we haven't thought of, and I like to give them some flexibility with their topics. Perhaps they could reply to us after they get the initial charge, and you know, give us a revised list or something. Maybe Dr. Marks has some things that, do you have anything that we've missed that you can think of?
Caught her off guard there.
Did I have that look? Not anything that you've missed, but I think that one of the questions that keeps coming up from people who are kind of on the fringes and quasi-interested in being part of this, but not really sure because they're not sure what the charge is what do these meetings look like? And are these meetings facilitated by Bob Butler?
Correct.
Okay, so Bob's facilitating all of the employee meetings. So then as you talk about the charge that the board has for the committee, one of the things that different employee groups struggle with is when we meet as committees is not knowing exactly what it is that the board wants us to do, whether we're just investigating things or if there's something pinpoint that you want us to look at, which is why you've heard me lately say, okay, I want to be sure that the board, this is what it is that you want us to do.
because we try really hard to maximize the time that everybody's putting into something to make sure that we're giving you what it is you want when we go to the group and say, here's what it is our charge is. So I appreciate the, as Commissioner Cummins is saying, maximizing the flexibility, because some folks may have some ideas that haven't been thought of here. And on the flip side of that, people actually knowing what it is that they're volunteering for and getting into when they're volunteering to be part of these committees.
Good point.
Kind of a balance.
Commissioner Johnson.
I guess when I think of it, it's as if there is no compensation system, and of course we can't pretend that there isn't, but so for the certified staff, the teachers to sit down and say, how should teachers be paid? Start from scratch. Don't start from this is what we have, what do we want to tweak, and maybe you come back to, yeah, that system is the system we want with some tweaks, but you're creating something, or you have the potential of creating something that's isn't burdened with, well, this is the way we've always done it. So, what's the best way to pay people that's rewards the things we want to reward and doesn't reward the things we don't want to reward?
Okay, I kind of think that's getting to number 2 quite a bit, so we may even go to that pretty soon. Commissioner Cummins.
I think a very important part of this, if I were on the other side and was going to look at giving my time to this, is how much can we really do? I mean, if we're saying we can break it all down to square one and start over, because there isn't this extra pile out there waiting. I think we all are very aware of that. So I don't want to get people's hopes up that there's going to necessarily be this big extra, but taking what we have, and I think what the board has been saying is that we're very open to completely restructuring it to meet the needs, not just, and that's a big piece of it for me, is that I hope that the people who come forward understand that this isn't just about the current staff, that we're talking about this because we're facing a pretty big issue of making sure we have teachers to bring about our vision and wanting to be a place that recruits and retains the best. And so modeling something that will bring people in that is very future oriented, I think is very important in maximizing flexibility, but kind of taking the approach that they're building something for the future here, not necessarily before. We've always sort of needed to, and understandably, especially in reaction to the handbook and to Act 10, sort of make sure people who are about to leave have what they need. So I'd like to see the focus be much more big picture vision for how to make sure that we have a legacy of quality teaching in this district that is that brings new people in. So if all we get back, I would be most disappointed if what we got back was don't touch OPEB, don't make any changes here. If it was not creative, honestly, and we've spent this money and this time, that would be, I think, disappointing as a board member. So that, I don't know if that helps with your question, Kay, but I don't think the board has said to this point that there's anything that we're not willing to look at, and that's why I like that Commissioner Johnson said, let's look at everything, because every piece can be readjusted, and there are some things that I know people hold on dearly to that maybe the community has questioned over the years, like why are we still paying for this? Are there other ways to do this? So I think there's a freedom there, but there's a responsibility to bring us something that's creative, I think.
Okay, I think that really moves us, both what Kay said and Commissioner Cummins, was to number 2 about what parameters or boundaries we'd want to put on it, not types of compensation. I'm hearing types of compensation we'd like to consider, most of them, as well as some intrinsic rewards. For number 2, the boundaries or parameters, let me just read what Bob Butler said for that. The second question will involve the establishment of a mission for the committee by the board that may entail outlining the parameters or boundaries of a compensation structure through an expression of the local community's values, the district's educational goals, which gets to what Commissioner Vu said, the district's budget parameters and legal constraints. And I think what they're referring to, do you want it to be market-based? Do you want merit pay? Do you want? I had things listed that I'm interested in, and I think that's the kind of boundaries or parameters they mean there. It's not necessarily the financial things, but what kind of values or systems you want inherent in that. Do you have any thoughts on that right now? Commissioner Hammack-Boyle.
Well, I got into the PowerPoint and kind of looked at all the different examples, and I guess what struck me as one that might be more favorable was levels and defining it that way. I think Ripon had something in there, something like that. But the parameters of it would come from committee to see what that would look like.
When you say levels, what do you mean?
Well, they had a beginning teacher. They didn't have that on there, but they had four levels too. And each one was kind of defined as to what it entailed, which would be part of what the committee would come up with, There were others too that I read them and I thought, how, and that's been brought up as a concern, how would you pay that over time? Because you don't know who would do the additional things that were specified in order to get more pay. And I know some districts they have, and they didn't have enough money to pay them. So I think that's the deep conversation we need. Who are we? We value our people, and what do they want that to look like?
I'd just like to follow up on that and combine with Commissioner Vu's. We should use Goal 2 as a guide. I said, the Goal 2 says the board and staff will create a collaborative, intentional, and engaging climate and culture using research-based practices to promote student learning. So when I think of collaborative kind of work, I think that's the kind of compensation structure we want that supports that and creates a collaborative work. So to me, that would be strongly in the charge. And to get at what you said, I had something sort of a little shorter than what you said. I said we should be creating career paths for our employees, something that they can move through their lifetime employment here, that makes them look forward to that. So I had those two as part of mine. So
you are more succinct than I am.
Commissioner Duex.
It almost sounds like we are asking for a mission of collaboration, of merit, and I'm not interested in competition that way for merit pay, but if you're asking the committee to come up with some kind of a structure that we can work in where we have self-reporting perhaps, or principal reporting, saying this person has done a new program in the last 5 years, and this is how it's working. And it sounds almost like we're at that point. I don't know if that's anybody else is looking at it, but I think we have to be really careful of that, sort of system of what are you doing, how's it working, and how do you qualify or quantify it?
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
When I, looking at those same levels, when I hear Commissioner Hammack-Boyle talking about the levels or the career paths, to me, that doesn't equal a competitive sort of merit pay situation. It's more of, seems to me, at least for the certified staff, it's more of a professional path, and it's more about each individual, building on their strengths and, improving their weaknesses and moving their own profession forward. And so, at least for the certified staff, that system should reward professionalism, and in the sense that, it's self-regulating and, looking towards continued learning and improving and self-monitoring, and to me that is, different than, getting a piece of money for each little thing. There's other models out there where if you do this, this, and this, you check off your little list and you get some extra money. To me, that's very similar to curriculum pay, frankly. And if, there's some, as a professional, sometimes you work until 6:30 at night because things need to be done, and sometimes you take off at 3 o'clock because everything is done, and sometimes you do extra reading at home because you need to for your job or because you need to for your own growth. And so I hope that the system rewards professionalism and isn't a checklist of this time, this many years, this these particular duties, and ends up with a lot of merit, I guess.
I know what you're saying, and sometimes peer review is a good way to quantify some of that.
Commissioner Zhang?
For boundaries, I would like it to just be realistic. I think Chris was alluding to this earlier. We have to have the fundings if we're gonna bring up all these steps and all these professionalism. We have to have the fundings. So I don't know, just keep it around the fundings.
Okay, agreed. Commissioner Johnson, what I first thought of right when you were talking, that was continuous improvement, which is what we talk a lot about in this district, which I think continuous learning is part of it. So. Others? I had something on mind. A question for the board was, well, a couple questions really. One was market competition. I mean, one reason we're doing this is because we are losing employees to other districts, and we want to retain them. And there's certainly some intrinsic things we can do, but do we want to consider, for example, would this be something, a bonus pay to hire someone because we can't get that position? Are those things within the realm of possibility? And frankly, that's something that, you could ask for in a referendum because it's not recurring. You just do it once. But any comments or thoughts about that, about how do we meet the market competition? Commissioner, comments?
I think we definitely want to be able to meet the market competition, and we've heard from our leadership that that's important. I want to be careful that we, sometimes if we say something enough, it becomes true in terms of people leaving just because of that. Some people have left that maybe we didn't want to hold on to, that maybe their work isn't aligned with our goals or where our leadership team's going, and they needed to find a better place for them. So I don't want to give more energy to that than maybe we have data to support, but we definitely want to be a place that, and some of those intrinsic pieces I think are important, that this is a place where, while I think it's important to have career pathways, how we are doing education today, I hope, is not how we're doing education in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And so locking somebody into some kind of a predictable path, I don't think we're going to be doing things exactly the same way. And so being a place where people can see professional development opportunities for themselves and can take on challenges and try new things, and it's going to sound like merit pay, that we want to compensate that, but I don't know if there's a nicer way to say it. But in a lot of industries, in a lot of places, when you give more and you are helping to move an organization forward, you're compensated. So I think that is one of the opportunities with all of this, is that we can encourage those types of employees to step up in all areas of our organization. And yes, there are some great things that come from just being that kind of finding your career to find your career and your actual job location to align so that you can be the best at what you're doing. But the reality is there a way that we can compensate that and find a new word? But I do think that there are indicators out there that say we need to make sure that we are compensating people based on how they're moving our organization forward.
Okay, thank you. Just to Go ahead, Commissioner.
That's a good point, Trish. I can remember myself, if you look at professionalism and leadership, when I was given the opportunity without any additional pay, one time someone was hired 0.5 so I could research assessments and get into that piece for our district. It was an amazing opportunity, and I didn't get a dime more for doing that except time. And some of that stuff that needs to be done for our district to make it richer, deeper, more research, more whatever, is oftentimes can be the intrinsic pieces that we could really look deeply into the professionalism and the leadership opportunities given our staff in our district. I don't know what that would look like exactly, but I experienced it once, and honest, if I would look back on my teaching career, that was an amazing opportunity and a wonderful time for me. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and those I look as the rewards of a job that it's beyond pay. It's something that you really value and you like to.
Pay's important.
Well, I agree, but there are rewards beyond that. Trish, to go back to what you said, we talked a lot about professionalism and collaboration and so forth. And I heard you say market competition is important, but we didn't want it to overwhelm, drive those things. So my hearing of that is that we would consider those earlier things higher than necessarily market competition if we were giving guidance to the committee. Would that be accurate?
Not necessarily. I do think that's important. I don't think that we've had this mass exodus of people going to other districts. I don't think that we need to be overly concerned. I still think we are a competitive district. We need to do more with compensation, but I think we are going in a certain direction. I think some people have left because maybe that's not the direction that they want to go in. And our board goals, our district goals, our leadership goals are very aligned right now. So it's very clear where this district wants to go.
Okay.
And if that's not for people, then.
Understood. Great. Yes, Commissioner Vu.
I'm not suggesting that we prioritize or rank, but market competition needs to be one of the criteria. In a way, that is one way to allow us the flexibility to strengthen which part of the program or which part of the goals in the district, either to do more or to do less. If you want to do more in a particular program, that programming eventually will include human resource. So if we want to have more specialty in reading, for example, we need to increase the number of teachers or the pay to attract good teachers in that area. So I'm not saying that we rank the importance of the different area, but I want to see market competition as one of the desire.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Johnson.
As far as market considerations, I guess my preference would be more of a holistic, we've got the compensation study, as a whole, are we underpaying some people or groups of people? And I think that's important to consider the market forces, so that we're not underpaying people. But as far as, this year we didn't have as many applicants in, one particular certification area. That makes me a little uncomfortable, putting a higher price on particular positions, for similar certifications and years of experience and that sort of thing. So, so sometimes when they talk about market forces, okay, it's, it's more difficult to get a, physics teacher or, or whatever, fill in the blank. And so to pay that person more makes me a little uncomfortable. I'd be more concerned about, our newest teachers, this group of teachers, or, are not being paid enough. So, that to me would be, if we're underpaying certain segments, that would be a good argument to the community to say, boy, it's really hard to recruit and retain teachers because we're underpaying this group of teachers or this, these food service workers or whatever it might be. And so if we've got underpaid people, If the compensation committee is coming and saying, boy, we really need to figure out a way to pay more in this segment, that would be a good thing to include on an operational referendum, because if we don't have enough money to go around, we're not going to start cutting people's pay. That's unrealistic. You wouldn't do that, in the private sector. You would hold them there and raise people up. And so I guess that's my thoughts on market forces.
Okay, I was thinking a little along those lines of referendum also. Yes, Commissioner John.
Well, if I remember correctly, some of the HR classes that I took, it's people come for the money initially, but they stay for their other stuff. And maybe we could, do like a bonus that first time they come in, and that would be it. Because I too will be very uncomfortable paying somebody a higher wage just because that season we had 2 applicants.
Right, and something like a bonus can be done on a non-recurring referendum because you're not needing it necessarily for the future. Commissioner Duax.
I want to go in a different direction, but if Commissioner Cummins has a remark.
Do you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I just think we need to be careful because I think we've said we want to give maximum flexibility, and now we're saying, oh, we're not going to be comfortable with, I mean, they might come back and say, hey, we need to pay more for math and science right now. And I think if we're already putting parameters, we're going against what we say our mission, or what our charge is going to be. So I'm not comfortable currently saying, oh no, we can't pay more for high demand positions, because I just don't know enough, and I'm not on that committee.
I was going to say, I think the lesson in the conversation really is that it's something that the committee should be aware of, that they'd want to bring to the board early so that they didn't go too far down the road and we said, oh, wow, I'm not sure about that now. So go ahead, Commissioner Duax.
Okay, this is a little bit different. We've already named some things like collaborative work, continuous improvement, professionalism, and who knows better than your own peers in English or music or whatever topic it is, whether you're making progress in those areas, especially in higher curriculum and high school planning and educational goals and accomplishing those goals. So I go back to peer review and some kind of reporting somehow that those things are going on. They know better than their own colleagues. And everybody has taught with somebody that's kind of lagging. And maybe we call them affectionately dead wood. But I really like to see the teachers evaluate their own progress and their own professionalism, and not just have it as some vicarious system of evaluation. And I think it would raise all the boats if everybody entered into that kind of professional activity.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one on here that I had was that Bob had brought up was the question of holding harmless. For example, don't lower current pay. Any comments on that? He had talked about that last time.
Are we?
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Cummins.
Are we talking about all areas? Are we? I don't.
Yeah, it depends on employee. I mean,
I don't think we.
That was something he had brought up that we should think about, was about whether or not should hold employees harmless, meaning designing a system that doesn't lower pay. So, and I think I know your question.
Yeah, I think that we've gotten information back from the compensation study that might not be possible. I don't think we're in that position yet to lock ourselves in one way or the other.
Okay. Others? Agree? Okay. Commissioner Hamblick-Boyle?
I agree as well.
Okay.
I don't want to penalize anyone or demote anyone or drop the pay. Maybe there's an alternative on how we could structure it so that over time the compensation will get to where it needs to be, but to cut somebody's wage, I think that's gonna, I don't think that's just the route I want to take.
I think that's where I'm at also. Commissioner Johnson.
I agree that we are going to, and we keep our options open, but it might be more realistic if the system comes to us and the current people, there's a phase in. So as people are replaced in positions, the compensation study is about the positions. And so that might be a way to, keep our options open, yet phase it in without, cutting any particular person at that moment.
So position versus person. Yes. Okay. Commissioner Hammack-Boyle.
I think that Bob talked about in the PowerPoint too that sometimes you gradually, you have a vision on what it's going to look like, but it can be a gradual way of doing it. And I can remember years ago when people at the top of the salary schedule took pay freezes in order to up base pay for everybody else. And those are hard conversations to have, but we wanted to be able to hire the best and brightest, and we wanted a compensation package that they would be willing to come to Eau Claire for. And that was the discussion we had and what we did. So I open that up just to say, the committee will talk that deeply, I'm sure.
My one comment along that lines is I feel strongly about a living wage. I feel like with the poverty in our district, we should not be contributing to that. So I would feel strongly about paying employees at least a living wage in our district. So
second that.
So that's all I had about parameters, boundaries. I got a lot of good feedback. We'll see if we can work with that. Any other comments before we go to the next point about the number of committees? Anyone else want to make any input? Okay, wonderful, thank you. So the other thing was a number of committees. Now, Bob Butler, he had sent a sample committee makeup for a teacher committee, and he had also had for basically every other possible group, administrative assistants, clerical, buildings and grounds, food and nutrition, paraprofessional educational assistants, and boy, is it a lot. You have, for example, a human resources director on every single one of those, and 2 board members on every one. We could talk about the makeup next, but my first impression was kind of an overwhelming number of committees, and I wanted the board's feedback on that. I don't know, Superintendent, if you have some also. You want to give a recommendation or something?
Well, given your comments before that you are anticipating that Bob Butler will facilitate all of these committees, I think that we would have to check in with him in terms of the time commitments and how he would structure that time. I think you are definitely going to have a committee to look at teacher compensation. And then, looking at the other work groups, you may be able to do some combinations. But I really do think that you're going to have to get Bob Butler's input on this, since he will be coming here from Madison to facilitate, and there's only so many, minutes in the day.
Right. And we will be paying him to do that. So.
Well, that is true, but what would be the most efficient way, and how could he get the greatest and broadest input from the different groups?
Okay. So I can check with him with that question. Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, it seems to me we're going to have at least 2. One would be thoroughly overwhelming. There is certainly overlap with Bob. I would imagine that there's some work that could occur without him. Perhaps he does, if we had 2 committees back to back the evening, and then they do some work on their own, and then he comes back, after they've done some work. So, logistically, however it works, it works. So I guess I would want to see at least 2, one certified staff and one hourly staff, whether we include administrators in with the certified, with the teachers, whether we need to have, the support staff, some of the non-affiliated, I guess, workers might fit in there. To me, non-affiliated doesn't make sense to have its own group. It's just that they've never been included in a particular union, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of people. So to have, 5 or 6 committees, probably too much, but one is not enough.
Yeah, okay. All right, Commissioner Vu.
I'm not saying how many committee there need to be, but for sure there need to be one big committee. And then from there you have subcommittee to do the work. And then when it's voting time, it's the big committee. And also to utilize Bob's time, every time is the big committee meeting, for sure. Minimum at 2, I agree.
So you're saying perhaps 2 big committees who then have subcommittees that do work. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, that would be the practical approach.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle.
I'm thinking too that it might start out bigger in the beginning as people get on board and learn about all the different options, prioritize. Everybody's kind of on the same page, and then maybe the subcommittees are off of there. I remember the handbook we pulled more people together. It was kind of that's when people started to really get everybody's system. I mean, nobody really even got each other's system back then. So, you want the understanding between everybody as well going into this.
So you're saying you see the value of multiple types of positions being together in the same committee. Okay. Commissioner Cummins.
I totally disagree, sorry. I feel like with the handbook it was so challenging because of that, and that this is even more detailed. And I think that we need to keep the groups separate, not necessarily like a group for everyone, but we need to pull our faculty out. I think that what happened with the handbook is, I mean, it ended up in where it needed to be, but it was not a smooth process, and a lot of the sticky points were coming after a history of collective bargaining, trying to find a common ground, and everybody gained and lost. And I think in this situation, we're talking about really different groups and really different measures of compensation, and so.
Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Trish. I think that's kind of what I was saying, just initially in the beginning, but I think they do need to break off into their own pieces. I think school, just funding and budget and that sort of piece of all of this for people to kind of understand that. You wouldn't want, that might be the piece that people learn kind of together and then go.
Commissioner Duax.
I think it would be valuable if we had one large committee to meet with Bob initially, and then they may want to self-select out teachers, unaffiliated, other groups. Excuse me.
Commissioner Cummins.
Am I correct in that Bob really has mostly worked with teacher groups, and most districts are only looking at that piece?
I don't know the distribution of the numbers on that. I suspect you're right, but I think he has done some with support groups because he set up, but I'm not clear on that. I can check with him.
And I thought originally our goal was to deal with our teacher group first, that was our goal. And so if I thought that was our goal.
I think the recommendation of the study was that you first look at the people who were below the market value and try to address that in some way. I think that was the first recommendation, and we could go back and look at those recommendations more formally and perhaps send a written report to the board.
Yeah, I find this a tough one. If you want, we can look at that, and I can see if Bob has any recommendations of how how to do this if you like. I can do that. Myself, I had, there's different ways to divide the pie. I thought you got teachers, support staff, you've got support staff that are hourly and salaried. You've got school-based, central office-based. Those could be significantly different, right? I didn't mean support staff, but staff that are hourly-based or salaried. But you've also got school-based, central office-based. Maybe there's a difference there. So I'm not sure how to divide the pie, frankly.
Why don't you talk with him and maybe he can give us further recommendations.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that on this one. Okay, so the last piece, number 4, is about committee composition. And you have it in front of you. We could just look at the teacher one first here. And the suggestion is 2 reps from an association, 1 or more teachers from elementary schools, specials, special ed, middle school, high school, guidance, 2 school board members, district administrator, business official, HR director, elementary principal, middle, high school principals, and director of curriculum instruction. Thoughts about this on Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle?
When I looked through that, that's a big committee, but I just wanted to make sure some were double that would represent preschool and also represent National Board Certified Teachers. So some of them can be both, but I just wanted to make sure those 2 entities were part of the group.
Commissioner Johnson?
Oh, early, that's a good catch. Looking at the list, well, first of all, if we're going to have 5 committees, then there's not going to be 2 board members on each. There would be 1. And even if we're only looking at 2 or 3 committees, it may still only make sense to have 1 board member on each.
That was my thought.
So I would make that change, and then where it says 1 or more high school, middle school, special, and elementary, that those actually would be 2 instead of 1. Otherwise, I think, that's an awful big responsibility for 1 high school teacher to be able to, provide that kind of perspective. And then you're also, it's almost half administrators and half teachers. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, just make sure I got that right. So most of the teachers are saying at least
so
you have 2 of them.
B, C, E, and F would each be 2, where it says 1 or more.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And that 2 school board members would only be 1.
Yeah, I was imagining 1 board member also, because frankly, I don't want us to influence it too much there. I would like to be aware, but yeah. Other comments, questions? What do you think? Commissioner Shaw.
So is the board member on this, is he there to just observe? Is that what we're saying? Or is he there to try to guide?
Bob Butler will guide it. Okay. I think he wants someone on there just so they have a board perspective if they need it. And the problem is it's only 1 board member, so who knows if it's the whole board perspective. So I kind of wonder about that. I can check with him further with that question, though. When we're done, we can do that, yes. Other questions, comments on this? Do you have a recommendation? Go ahead.
I think I've heard this, but I don't know that I've heard the word used, and that is sustainability for whatever plan comes into play. And I think that was one thing that Bob Butler kind of cautioned you about, so including that criteria for sustainability.
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Zhang had said fiscally realistic, so I was kind of taking it to be that. Yes, thank you. Okay, I've got a lot here. Do we have any public comments on this committee report? I forgot for the other policies, but any comments from the public on this committee work? No, okay, we got a quiet audience. Okay, all right, waiting to see what we do, I guess. Just so I get a little feedback from the boards, we've got these 4 things. How would you like us, eventually we're going to have to write up a charge and a committee. Do you want, like, in agenda setting for us to come up with something? Would you like a short committee, like 2 people to come up with this? How would you like us to move forward? After I get some feedback from Bob, of course. Any suggestions how you would like this put together?
How about volunteers?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Commissioner Amagboyo.
So are you wanting us to volunteer?
Yeah, if we could have 2 people, and I'm happy to be in on it too if necessary, because I've got a lot of notes here and I talked to Bob, but if you're very willing to help draft something.
I'm willing.
Okay, anyone else would like to? Okay, well, Chris and I will sometime over Christmas break after we talk to Bob and we talk an agenda setting about a process for this. I suspect we'll talk about agenda setting, but I suspect we'll probably bring forth again at the committee level like this, and then it would be a resolution. I think we're not there yet for resolution, so that's kind of what I'm thinking for this. Reasonable? Commissioner Johnson.
As we're looking at the other committee or committees, I just would reiterate the balance between the people who actually will be paid within the system versus, others, administrators and whatnot who, have input kind of, of the overview. So if we're looking at an hourly group that, that you'd have 2 or 3 from food service, 2 or 3 from buildings and grounds, 2 or 3 support staff, that there would be good representation by the employees that would be paid by the system in the balance of that committee.
So kind of 50-50 of those that are kind of vested interest in it and those outside of that,
Maybe.
You're saying.
And if we end up with 2 committees, one for, certified salary workers and one for hourly, that hourly group would probably be more than 50% people who would be within the system because, you'd have different groups coming together. So it should be less than 50% administrative, I guess, how I would say
Okay,
it.
I see. Commissioner Vu.
Do we have an idea or preference about the selection itself, the procedural? Not that I want to do that
You're
work.
welcome to give that now, because he mentions that in here. I forget where it is now. He mentions how sometimes it's just been through volunteers. We've just taken volunteers, and that's how it's worked. Sometimes he said, or we've chosen people that we thought would be appropriate. So if you have any input on that, that would be great.
I would hope that we allow the staff first stab at volunteer, but at the same time, we may want to be able to have some influence, and I don't know how to do that. I don't want someone to be volunteer, but it's very into his or her own seeing things, and the view is not inclusive. So maybe we can have some kind of influence, but not completely influence, but maybe guide to have productive committees.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure how I do that either, but did you have something, Commissioner Chung, or no? Okay, go ahead.
I like the volunteering. I like that, but if it's, if the committee sees that we need this person, I also like to be able to volunteer people as well. Just my 2 cents.
Yes, Commissioner Vu.
Just another thought that came in mind. What if we have a process where people actually apply to be on the committee? Volunteer to be on the committee. So at first we know how many volunteer. Secondly, we at least see who's volunteer.
And then it's a kind of selection process, we're saying. Commissioner Cummins.
I really hope that this level of detail is actually not our work.
Other questions, comments? Okay. So we good for now on this topic? Okay. So Chris and I will talk to Bob Butler to see feedback on those few items, and we'll see what we can put together. Maybe we'll have more questions after we do that. So, okay. Great, thank you. Let's see. I gotta get my agenda out. Yeah, I thought we were done. Okay, mine wasn't up. Okay, do I have any requests for future agenda items from board members? Do we have anything? Okay, seeing none. So now we need to adjourn to closed session, and we'll do that and go in there. Thank you. What's that? Sure. Do we need a motion to adjourn to closed session? Okay, I guess we do.
So moved.
So I have a motion, second?
Second.
Have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, so motion to adjourn in closed session. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Happy holidays. Relax. Maybe we'll get some snow to ski a little bit.
This program was recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.